is 6 o'clock on Tuesday, September 23rd, and I will call this Lacey City Council work session. We'll call this Lacey City Council work session to order. It looks like tonight the mayor is absent, excused, as well as Councilmember Greenstein and Councilmember Stedman will be joining us remotely. And with that, we, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Squaw Indian Tribe and the Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allow our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. And with that, we will move on to an approval of our agenda tonight.
To approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Seconded. Is there any discussion about tonight's agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
That was an aye here.
No opposition, so that motion passes unanimously. And the first item on our agenda tonight is public comment. It looks like we have one person signed up. Courtney Holthouse, please step to the podium, state your name, where you're from, what city you live in, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, I'm Courtney Marie Holthouse. I'm currently right now in Tumwater, but I'm a litigant against a Lacey business. My grandmother raised 5 children. She turned generic groceries into meals that felt like abundance. She was a queen on this earth, an angel in the kitchen, and I respected her insane endurance. My grandfather was a Vietnam veteran, a prisoner of war. He survived hell most people can't even imagine. And still, after everything he endured, he looked at me, just a little blonde girl, and said, "You're going to do something amazing in this world." I will not let him down. Maybe the amazing thing he foresaw isn't fame or riches. Maybe it's this: every letter I send, every stamp I press, every court filing I drag my body through in pain, standing in front of systems that thought I'd fold, because I challenged the hospitals, Providence, and Multicare Lacey Emergency here. I challenged the Washington State Department of Corrections, and I'm challenging the Tumwater Police Department, the very institutions people fear to question. I'm a pro se plaintiff in a federal lawsuit against them. They've tried to make me disappear. They tried to medicate me into silence, refused to give unemployment and crime victim assistance, and caused me to suffer still. And maybe I am the freak. Maybe I am the damned. Fine, then let me be clear. I'm a proud freak. Because I refuse to shut up, because I'm still standing here when they thought I'd be gone. But if they tried to take me so easily, me, someone who asks the big questions and notices little details easily because of my PTSD, then how many others never had the chance? How many people were injected with sedatives before they could even speak up about misconduct? How many are still locked in hospitals or trapped under court orders, not because they were dangerous, but because institutions couldn't bear accountability? How many people have grown old and died in a psychiatric hospital for daring to speak up? This fight is not just about me. It's for the children who were dismissed instead of believed, for women punished simply for raising their voices, for disabled people and elders shoved aside like they don't matter, for every soul institutions have disappeared because silence is more convenient than truth. My grandparents likely lived through hell but still carried faith in family, in kindness, in me. That faith is not wasted. The fire has always been in me, and no matter what it cost, I will not stop. Because I always had the flames, and I still carry them with me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That was the only person we had signed up. Is there anybody else in this chamber wishing to address this council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our cultural and recreational funding plan. Jen?
Fundraising plan. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, council members. Thanks for your time this evening and allowing us to present the work we've been doing. Some quick introductions. We have Jenny Folia-Jones, who's a consultant contracted by the Lacey Community Foundation, who's done this work. We also have Chad Carpenter here. He's a Lacey Community Foundation board member, so I want to thank him for his support with this project, and also thank Becky Ryder, who's not here tonight, but is another one of the Lacey Community Foundation board members. So I'm just going to start us off by giving a little bit of background and general context of, why we're having this conversation and how this fundraising plan came about. I'll kick it over to Jenny Folia-Jones. After that, she'll provide a summary of the actual fundraising plan that's included in your packet this evening. We worked, as I said, we worked closely with Jenny and the foundation over the past year to create this roadmap to increasing and diversifying revenue streams. And then we'll close out by briefly talking about some next steps and answering any questions that the council has. So with the background, as we know, Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation proudly provides residents and members of the community subsidized programs and services, many of which are of no cost to people. These offerings provide a critical service, which is promoting physical and mental health, increasing exposure to cultural and social opportunities, and providing safe gathering spaces for groups. And as the cost of goods and labor has increased, it's important that our programs remain low cost and accessible to folks in the community. And then regarding unfunded key capital projects, I know that we've talked a lot about this lately, but as we know, Lacey Parks has many projects such as the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center, and also all the projects that we've talked about on the Parks Capital Improvement Program. And so those are, obviously lacking funding, and we've been tasked to diversify and increase revenue streams, understanding the limited capacity of the general fund to serve all city functions and programs. We are looking at diversifying and increasing the revenue streams. In March of 2024, we entered into a contract with the Lacey Community Foundation for them to provide us with a 5-year fundraising plan. And so Jenny has worked directly with our staff to author the plan. And the scope of this plan was to explore and identify annual fundraising strategies, identify potential funding sources, proposal of 2 annual events dedicated to specific projects, and then communication strategies to execute the plan. So the intention was for us to acquire an ideal situation of a plan, or a Cadillac of a plan, so that we have, a proper roadmap drafted by an industry expert to reference. And that said, there's bandwidth, obviously challenges with current staffing, and we're limited in being able to fully actualize all the details of the plan, and we'll talk about that as we continue through the conversation. But we'll continue to work internally to identify which elements of the plan to pursue and how and which ones, are viable at this time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny to provide us a summary of the fundraising plan that was included in your packet.
Perfect, thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city staff. As Jen said, my name is Jenny Folia-Jones, and I was hired by the Lacey Community Foundation to create a 5-year fundraising plan for the city. And so tonight, I'm just going to provide a really high-level overview of that plan and discuss how it will diversify funding for strategies that, while remaining conservative in the projections. So the heart of this plan really is diversification. So the plan's going to lay out a mix of approaches that's going to make it so that the city is not relying on just one stream of funding. Starting with individual contributions, which will create opportunities for specific individuals within the community who want to give and in a meaningful way. There's different levels that are set up for that. Business contributions, partnering with local businesses for sponsorship opportunities, whether that be for specific projects or events. Major contributors, this will be, engaging your larger donors to be able to, if that they want to leave a legacy for city's future, they will be able to do that. While also pursuing foundation and government grants that are going to align with Lacey's strategic initiatives as well as cultural and infrastructure projects. And the plan also lays foundation for, or the groundwork for developing an endowment fund, which is, will provide long-term sustainability with contributions that will grow over time. You go this way, right?
So
Did that go? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the city of Lacey is well positioned for this plan because it has a lot of community strengths already. So it has a strong local economy, as you know, that's anchored in state government, healthcare, education, and military. There is continued population growth within the city that brings new potential donors and sponsors. There is already a culture of volunteerism and philanthropy rooted in this community, and the city has strong partnerships with tribal nations already for that open opportunities for collaboration and shared initiatives. So at the same time, the plan also has safeguards that are built in to help against any risks that, like donor fatigue, economic vulnerability, uncertainty. So with flexible giving options and diversified donor engagement, it will help keep those contributions sustainable even during potentially changing economic times. So opportunities for growth, looking ahead, the plan does identify several areas for opportunity. One is continuing to strengthen tribal partnerships for culturally significant projects and shared priorities, building long-term business sponsorship agreements, leveraging signature events, and then also engaging younger donors and as well as Lacey's growing diversified population. So, importantly, all projections are conservative in this plan. So over the next 5 years, the city could raise $1 million through a diversified approach, but each year's projections are believed to be achievable. So they start off modest in year one, and then as momentum grows, you'll see an increase in funding. So the plan does outline a range of contribution levels to engage the entire community, so in meaningful and sustainable ways. So something for individual giving that provides residents an accessible entry point. There's different levels that are built into the plan that you'll be able to see. So from that all the way to in-kind contributions that that businesses might be able to give to reach city initiatives on specific projects. And then finally, the plan does have specific fundraising opportunities for the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center, so you'll see that outlined as well. That will help allow donors to directly support spaces and features within that space that will serve communities for generations. The plan does recommend 2 signature annual fundraising events. The fall event serves as the formal gala that will support rotating city priorities, while the annual Lacey Derby is a new event that is being proposed, which would be a themed, family-friendly event that benefits the Lacey Museum and Cultural Center. And that theme was, it's kind of fun, we were looking at the history, that theme was selected because of the racetrack that resided in the city of Lacey, and kind of playing off the theme of the history of that to go along with fundraising for the museum. So the plan includes performance metrics to track progress over a time. So success is going to be measured through donor engagement. That's going to be growth and retention of those donors. Fundraising event results, which would include attendance and revenue of those events, as well as grant funding that's secured. So these measures provide a full picture of progress beyond just dollars. So while you're looking at both financial support, you're also looking at long-term community involvement as well. And then the communications plan does outline how the city should engage the community in fundraising over the next 5 years. So it does set objectives, it identifies target audiences, and recommends a balanced mix of digital tools, traditional media, and direct engagement that will help the city plan beyond the first 5 years. So I'll pass it back to Jen.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Yep, and just as a wrap-up, and then be able to, turn it over to council for questions, just wanted to acknowledge again, just inability with current staffing capacity to fully actualize this plan. I mean, that's a lot that she just summarized. But, given the limited capacity of the general fund, it's an exciting roadmap that shows ways that we can increase and diversify our revenue streams to support our services and potentially, complete key capital projects. So the next step is to continue reviewing the revenue buckets that Jenny identified in the plan and, determine which ones are priorities for us to pursue, and then find the most viable way to put those into motion. And, as I had discussed in May, it was History Month, and we gave a presentation. Part of the next steps will include looking at the funding gaps for that new museum and cultural center in connection with this fundraising plan. So, yeah, with that, we would be happy to answer questions.
Questions, council? Councilmember?
Yeah, I have a few questions. In this plan, I looked through it pretty in-depthly, and it keeps referencing the word net. But I think the gross is probably a more accurate term for the revenue, because this is a very revenue-based plan, and it doesn't really go over expenditures and how much things will cost. That's where some of my concerns are, especially, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but over the course of 5 years, it's not really a lot of money. And so I would want to make sure that there's a cost-benefit analysis done on each one of these proposals to make sure that we're not actually overspending in resources just to get, potentially a couple dollars or even in the negative. And so that's where I'm a little bit wary, because this is a really in-depth plan, but it's not really factoring in how much cost goes into some of these things. So I have a few concerns there.
Anybody else? So in the communications plan, I'm hoping somehow, all those people that voted yes to the MPD can get another chance or another opportunity. Can we, get that information granulated so that we could, kind of reach out to them in a maybe in a way that allows them to say, that comes from us that, hey, we know that this didn't work out, and I know it's later in the agenda, but we know that this MPD didn't work out for us, but there's still an opportunity for you to make a difference. I know that, I'm not part of the messaging team, but I do want to see if there's a way to reach out to those people specifically, because we did get some of that data from some of the precincts, to know that there's, another opportunity coming. I know that's kind of pretty specific.
Yeah.
kind of a thought process and request there, but it does kind of,
Well, I
I
think,
don't know how we could do that.
yeah, I think, though, if we were to look at a future project of implementing or actualizing the full plan or pieces of the plan, we can definitely get the word out. Here's another way you can support certain projects or programs in general. I don't know about how to do a direct marketing back to those who voted in favor of the MPD, but I think it's just more just how we communicate out that this is another opportunity to help support some of these programs and facilities that provide value back to the community. But it's also not just parks. It could be other projects like the Veteran Service Hub, other things too that
Capital
are
things.
just general facilities of need within the community.
I'm hoping to kind of give those people another opportunity to make a contribution if at all possible. Is there any other questions from the council?
Just on that note, I'm sure we can't get individual voter by voter data to reach those people because it's confidential and the auditor would never give it to us. But we do probably have lists of people who were willing to volunteer on the Yes campaign. And so we'd have to take that offline, I think, but that somebody knows a group of people who were willing to put the work in to make that happen. And
Yeah.
that might be the core group of people we would want to reach out to first.
All things are possible. Thank you guys for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Yep. I'll see you in a few minutes.
next on our agenda tonight is our communications manager, Ty. coming to give us our community service results.
All right. Hello, council. Happy to be here presenting on our 2025 community survey. Get ready for an action-packed presentation. Community survey, this is the first community survey that we have done. And with that, I'll provide a little bit of background and go into some of the information with it there. So the community survey's targeted action of our communications plan in goal number 2. So in this case, it's an extension of the Lacey Cares initiative to determine community sentiments. It's also a direct line item to conduct a biannual survey to better understand community sentiments about the city and other related things as well. So, and with that, to do the survey, we contracted with the national polling company called Polko. And this company does surveys for communities across the country. They ask all the cities the same questions, so we can compare ourselves very easily to other cities. Community members were randomly sent a postcard in the mail, and there were 3,000 of those postcards that went out. Here's a sample of what one of those looked like. Note that the information is in English and Spanish and Korean. I actually have a hard copy here too, if you want to see a hard copy. But following the QR code there in the corner or the web address on the back would lead folks to a form that they can fill out online. And there's a follow-up with a paper version for those that did not want to take it online or could not for whatever reason. Here's the area where the survey went out. So the map there on the left is the districts within the UGA. However, the survey only went out to Lacey residents, so that means just the area that's within city limits there. But the district boundaries were handy in comparing the different areas that the survey was sent to and referring to the different places it went to. The sampling was proportionate to the population distribution across the city there too. Timeline for the survey, that was started in right around the middle to late part of May and concluded on June 30th. Polko got those results back to us close to the end of July. Now, with the 3,000 postcards that went out, about 4% of those were returned because the household address was vacant or the postal service was unable to deliver for whatever reason. So that left remaining about 2,800 to 2,900 postcards. And of those, about 292 completed the survey. So that's about 10%. And I asked Polko specifically if the 10% response rate is good enough to get a statistically valid sample. And they affirmed that, yes, that is the case. And they also noted that 10% is consistent with the numbers that they typically see from all the surveys that they do across the country, too. So it's right in line with their work and what they see. You also see the 95% confidence rating and the 5.7% margin of error. I clarified that confidence rating with Polko as well. They said that if we were to repeat this survey again and again, then 95% of the time we'd be within those same numbers. So they feel pretty confident about those numbers. Recently, I did get a question about, again, just the sheer numbers and the validity of the survey. And with the roughly 60,000 residents in Lacey, is getting 3,000 postcards out there and then 10% back, is that really, again, statistically valid? And remember that while we do have about 60,000 residents within Lacey, we're not sending postcards out to every man, woman, and child that lives in the entire area. We're sending them out to households, and of those, there's about 24,000 households thereabout. And we had 3,000 postcards that goes out, so that's about an eighth of the city, and of that, we got 10% back, and that's still statistically valid for what Polko wants and what they did receive back.
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about the confidence rating and what does that mean to us?
Yeah, it means that how confident are you in the results? And Polko looks through their statistical analysis, they feel good about those results. And in conducting that survey, like I said again and again, they would feel comfortable with the results that would come back, and they'd be roughly the same time after time. So they believe their process was sound.
Got it.
And I would question that slightly, because at least according to my statistics class that I took in college, it's like anything above a 3.2 margin of error is statistically, an unreliable poll. So that's where I was a little shaky on this.
Yeah, I thought that 5.7% was also a little high for a margin of error, but they seemed pretty firm in their statistical analysis. And, they're a polling agency, so I kind of defer to that.
I wonder if it's also just, like, this is typical for a survey like this, where it is very difficult to get people to return mail or to participate in something they get in the mail that might look like junk mail.
Yeah,
So even though it's not as statistically valid, like the margin of error is high, it's in range with this kind of survey. It's like the best we can expect.
right.
And these are just the mail-in so far?
Yeah, these are the from the postcards, and folks went online and took the survey there.
This includes the online?
This includes online and also any paper copies too.
Okay.
So they would follow up with a paper version, and those would get returned directly to Polko, and they would enter that in with the same analysis there.
And just to maybe offer a brief clarification, and good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. So when we refer to online, we're not talking about an open survey for everybody. Just want to make sure that we're being consistent, that it's the 3,000 at this point in time. That information will be discussed a little bit later in the presentation. And I think going back to Councilmember Dunning, your question, Polko obviously does this with hundreds of communities across the nation, and they're looking to get that within that 95% confidence rating. And I think the great thing to keep in mind with the 7.5 margin of error is when you're looking at the overall scores, to consider that that could be, plus 5.7 or lower by 5.7. So keeping that in mind is when you're considering the data and the information. Correct.
Yeah. And again, the Polko felt comfortable with those numbers, so I trust that. All right, so of those communities that Polko works with, they actually do the survey with over 500 communities across the country. So we can compare ourselves to those communities. We can also compare ourselves to communities like us. So we had an opportunity to look at some different communities, and we picked out 17 different communities that were similar in population, similar income levels, and were in a rough geographic area, so Washington, Oregon, California. And I'll refer to those as our peer communities or communities similar to Lacey as we roll forward here. And here are the different categories that people were asked about. Each one of these categories had several questions to go with them. I'm not going to go into every single one of those, but I will say that the questions varied from things that were under city responsibility, stuff like parks and other city services, community design, stuff like that, to questions that pertain to work that we're kind of partners with, things like joint animal services, library, community events, that kind of thing. And then there were also questions about some of the other things that we don't have direct involvement in, such as healthcare or childcare, gas utilities, electricity, that kind of thing. So with some of our results, here's really the takeaways from this. First is that this is the first survey, so this is going to provide benchmarks or a baseline for the future. So the numbers that we are getting back are going to be ones that we can compare ourselves to for year after year after year. So that's the big thing to keep in mind. Also, that the community, for the most part, scored really similar to our other peer jurisdictions, with several areas outperforming the average and others highlighting some opportunities for improvement. And that's just not with our peer jurisdictions too. It's also nationally. We scored very similar nationally. Still, we've got some areas that we can improve upon and other areas we outperform the nation. So that's great to see. I will also highlight here that better communications is one thing that we want to look at too. And that's, I'll go into some of the nuances of that here shortly, but with these general results, keep in mind, again, I'm not going to go over every single question of the survey, but I will go into the overall question for each of the 12 categories, and we'll focus on those overall scores here. Polko also actually showed some high-performing areas in their analysis. One is that public transportation came in very high on this survey. And the public transportation in Lacey was higher than a lot of the national benchmark that we saw too, which was pretty neat. Bus and transit services were significantly high in both our custom benchmarks and nationally.
It helps that it's free.
Right, I was gonna say because it's free.
I've heard many people say that.
How much longer do we have free? It was a 5-year, right?
It's a 5-year, that we extended it out another year pilot, but I think the intention is probably that it will keep going, although that decision has not been formally made.
I would debate nothing's for free.
Yeah. Zero cost to the consumer is the better way to say that.
I mean, our tax dollars are paying for it, but the money that was being collected in the boxes on the buses wasn't paying for the service. It was paying for a tiny fraction of the service for buses. And so
Right, I was gonna-
removing that box on the buses actually resulted in administrative savings.
And because the fare collection boxes were in way beyond their useful life, and we were looking at having to convert to the ORCA electronic card reader service, it would have cost more to gear up for that and to pay the annual contract for that, ORCA charges for that, than we would get in fares, unless we charged fares that nobody would ride the bus for. So you can zero yourself out real quickly that way.
Yeah, but I mean, was that part of the ballot measure? Was that explained to the citizens, or did that happen after the vote?
Before we go too far off the rails, let's
Yeah.
finish our presentation, and then we can continue talking about bus fares.
Sounds good. I will touch on mobility a little bit later on the presentation here. Natural environment also scored very highly, so nearly 8 out of 10 residents rated the natural environment in Lacey favorably. So that includes things like air quality and cleanliness in the community and open spaces and that kind of thing. So Polko also highlighted some other high-performing areas. No surprise here, parks and recreation offerings are a community strength. People love the parks here in the community. 8 in 10 residents gave a favorable rating to the quality of parks and recreation opportunities. City parks, walking trails, fitness opportunities all rated very highly. Residents also expressed pride in their neighborhoods and the cleanliness of their neighborhoods and the community, and the places that they could gather publicly as well. So, and then what they call focus areas here. Safety perceptions were highlighted as an area for attention, I'll say. And just over half of the respondents gave favorable ratings for feelings of safety, which is a little bit less than the national benchmark, but still in line with our peer communities in this area. And I'll talk more about safety in a little bit down the road here in a few slides. Affordable housing, also concern. And then at the bottom there, public engagement is also an area of opportunity. And it's important to recognize with that with public engagement, we're talking about people who are connecting with the community and the city and that kind of thing. There was some sentiment of, it's not a matter of folks not getting some of the information that they need about the positive things that are happening, but so much as folks really want to know what the problems are and how we are fixing them. What is the positive work that we are doing to solve the issues in the community? So, also important to recognize that perception is not always reality, and this is where we get into the weeds of trying to determine thoughts and rationale behind some of the numbers. And so the survey results reflect how residents feel about their experiences in the community, the services they receive or may not receive. But that doesn't always align with some of our actual performance data. So if folks are concerned about safety, well, we know from the presentation from the chief earlier this month that those crime numbers are down. So, I mean, it's a perception game, and that's where we need to be careful of the conclusions that we draw and do better communication about the things that are happening here. Okay, and with that, let's look at overall governance of the city. There's the overall confidence in Lacey government is the question here. And the way that Polko phrases the answers is they rate anything that's excellent or good as positive. So in this case, that would be 51% positive, and I'll refer to those numbers in the same way as we move along here. Overall economy, that category includes availability of jobs and other things pertaining to economic prosperity. I believe there's a question in there about how will you feel living here in few odd years with the economy the way it is, that kind of thing. As I mentioned, mobility, really one of our highest parts of the survey, specifically with public transportation. So this category included just walking around Lacey, but also included biking and driving. There's questions about carpooling, ease of getting from place to place, that kind of thing. So a lot of higher marks in there, and I'll show you some specific numbers later. Community design, this is a lot of the CED side of things. That includes questions about zoning, affordable housing, housing supply, commercial spaces, planning, that kind of thing. Here's numbers for utilities. Now, we don't have control over a lot of these things, but they still scored very highly. So internet access, electricity, gas is in there too. One thing that we do service those water, and stormwater is also included in this category as well. So the numbers for public safety are a little more even here. And if you dig into the data, there's some nuance there of feeling safe in your neighborhood versus outside of your neighborhood. And I can expound upon that later on if the council chooses to. Again, our natural environment scored very highly. Air quality is included in this, tree canopy, that kind of thing. Parks and Rec. That's the overall quality of parks and recreation opportunities. Overall quality of life in Lacey. And here's health and wellness. This includes things like the availability of food and water, childcare, health care. There's also questions on there of like, how healthy do you think you are? Which doesn't really pertain necessarily to city business, but glad that people would think about that. Arts, culture, and education. Arts scored highly as well, but not all of this is within the city. A lot of arts and culture is really done through our partners and other organizations to put on different concerts and celebrations and that kind of thing. And inclusivity and engagement. These numbers are also a little closer there, as you can see. So, as I said, every category has multiple questions, and so I want to break down this category a little bit farther here. So, the questions there on the left represent some of the questions that are in this category. So as you can see, the top one there is Lacey as a place to raise children. So the percentage there next to it, which is 69% in that blue-gray box, that again represents the people that rate us excellent or good on that particular question as defined by Polco. And the national benchmark there next to it says similar. That means that we're similar to the rest of the places that Polco conducts this survey across the country. And the custom benchmark there next to that is how we compare to those other 17 communities that are similar to us that I told you about before. So for the question about Lacey being a place to raise children, 69% of respondents rate that positively, which is similar to the national numbers and also similar to our other peer communities. And you can see some of the other numbers there for the rest of this category. Looking at mobility, again, one of our highest rated categories in the survey. You can see ease of travel by car in Lacey, ease of public parking. Down there, you see ease of walking in Lacey is at 47%, and it says lower and lower. So that's lower than the national numbers and also lower than our other peer communities. And again, this could be for a number of reasons. This is where I caution everybody on drawing conclusions from surveys. Everybody will want to know, well, why is that number at 47? Is that high? Is that low? Why would people respond that way? And it could do with ease of access across a roadway, like trying to go across Martin Way or something like that. Could have something to do with the condition of sidewalks. Could have proximity of my house to the places I want to walk to, the businesses I want to go to. So there's a lot of different things that are mixed up into these results and the way people would answer a question and why they would answer it that way. Whereas you can see here, ease of travel by public transportation in Lacey is 55%, which is higher than the way that other people across the nation think of public transportation in their communities, but yet still similar to our peer communities too. So what are we going to use these survey results for? Well, the results, will, of course, will help us make policy decisions and therefore budget decisions too, where things are happening. One example of that is here in the DEIB strategic plan. So remember that the DEIB plan has 34 different questions in it that can be answered by the community survey. So those are all spread amongst these three categories: community access and engagement, programs, policies, and services there in the orange, and livability there in the green. And many of these questions in the DEIB plan have goals that the percentage of people doing something or rating something positively should be increasing over time. And we didn't have numbers for that, but now we do. So for example, under the orange box there, program, policies, and services category, there's an item called rating of overall city customer service increases, and scores are consistent across demographics. So we actually have a question about that from the community survey, overall customer service by Lacey employees. And you can see that the percentage there represents the number of people who rated us excellent or good, which is 73%. National benchmark is how similar we are, again, to the rest of the places that Polco conducts this survey, which, again, we are similar to those places. And the custom benchmark is, again, those 17 other communities that are like us, which, again, we are similar. So with this being our first community survey, this helps us set a starting point for numbers in the DEIB plan. So now we know that we've got a baseline for that particular question, 73%, and we'll want to see that increase in the next DEIB in the next community survey. But this is where things can get even more fun here, is that you can break down every question by further demographics. So here we have that same question here in the orange, rating overall customer service, and the community survey there, overall customer service by Lacey employees, and the overall number is 73%. But you can also look at it by sex, by race, by age, by area. So you can see that people of color rate that 63%. People that live in Hawks Prairie rate that 67%. People 18 to 34 rate that 73%. So you can further break down these numbers and kind of get to the heart of why people are rating something the way they are. Yeah.
I do have a little bit of concern breaking down race just by people of color and white. I don't feel like that. People of color, we're a very diverse community, and it's going to be really hard to kind of identify what communities need more support than others if we just leave it up to people of color and white. So if there is a way to expand that so we could better focus on the different communities, I think that would be a better way to do it moving forward.
Do we have the option of further disaggregating that demographic data on race and ethnicity? Or is it just those two? Did it come to us aggregated?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. At this point in time, the way that Polko does the survey, they combine those categories. That's certainly some feedback that we can provide to Polko, that we'd love to see that option in the future. But without getting every single submission, that would be hard for us to be able to change. And I believe, actually, if you look at the survey, it does actually break down into different categories. So if you did have all of the data, you could perform an analysis on that. But right now, the way that they present it and do their statistical modeling is based on those categories.
I mean, I'm all for protecting sensitive demographic data so that it's not identifiable, right? Because that builds trust in the survey. But even with the margin of error, there's a significantly different experience being had by people of color versus white folks. Like the perception of community service is different. And that's worth focusing on.
I'm actually going to touch on that a little bit here too with this next question. So this is in the orange there. It says rating of city creating a welcoming environment increases, scores consistent across demographics. So that's from the DEIB plan. But we don't really have a specific question in the community survey about that. But we do have two similar questions, which are about how all residents feel welcome and how open and accepting the community is towards people of diverse backgrounds. So that's a way to answer that question through two other questions, which you can see here. And I highlighted the numbers that are 10 points above or below the overall percentage score, just so they stand out. And that's a way of looking at numbers that might be a little more statistically different, and we can then try and make some analysis from that. But you can see the numbers there in the area and in the race, and just how things are a little bit different.
So if they didn't granulate the people of color section, did they break down like how many came back in a different language?
I don't.
Like, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I think we can certainly ask Polko for that data, and they'd be able to provide of how many folks went through the Spanish or the Korean link, and we can follow up on that information. One thing I think to highlight too about the demographics, and it does a really good job of explaining this in the report too, is that it's weighted as well. And so Ty, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's statistically, they look at the, and there's actually a page on it in the report itself, which I believe you got in your packet, that explains it better. But they get the results back, what they call unweighted, which are the raw data, and then they could extrapolate that data across the entire community, which adds weight to it as it changes the percentages. So in that way, we can make it better fit the demographic look of our community. And again, that's statistically valid.
Yeah, I think we should offer them that feedback. I mean, it almost feels racist to me to group everybody as POC. I mean, how can we extrapolate extrapolate meaningful data from this to know which communities feel strongly and some less strongly, to really, I mean, it's just not helpful. to have-
Especially when we have large demographics of different communities here.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this our first one with them?
This is our first one with them, and I think
Right.
we will certainly provide that feedback, and we'll
Right.
get that information on the different languages. I think one thing to consider too is as you get smaller and smaller sample sizes, your confidence level goes down.
Yeah.
And then your margin of error goes up. And so part of the reason that they may be categorizing it the way that they did was to kind of keep very similar margins based on how many return surveys they got from certain demographics. But we'll certainly touch base with them on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm highlighting here is, race and age and area, things like that. But you can also break down our results by other categories too. So that's just a sample. There's a lot more than just those. And for, someone gets kind of into the nerdy weeds like me, if you are interested in seeing how parks are rated, depending on how long a person has lived in the community, we now have data for that. If you want to know how people rank quality of life depending on what area of the city they live in, we have data for that now. If you want to know how people rank local education, arts, and culture, depending on what type of house they live in, I mean, we have data for that. So you could break down this stuff into many different ways. And there is a dashboard, and I'll make sure that the council gets that dashboard and can go in there and categorize things and play around with it a little bit. It's really interesting to see some of those breakdowns. Okay, so for next steps, what's next for the results? Well, we're going to fill out the 34 questions for the DEIB plan. So there's that. Also, there'll be some communications work to publicize the numbers in some way here. We're working on that. And then, of course, in 2 years, we're going to go through this entire process again. So we'll be doing this every 2 years, and we'll have those baseline numbers, and then we can see how the numbers change. And that should be really interesting. One other note here is that, remember that this is a community survey, this is a snapshot in time, and this is the first time that we've done this. And these numbers should not be viewed as like our only source for making policy decisions or anything like that. This is just one tool in our toolbox going forward, and combining with all the other tools that we use. This is something that's helpful for making the decisions to move the city forward and the things that we choose to do. And I think that's about it.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Denning.
And I'm going to be a Debbie Downer, so I'm going to pick this apart pretty well. I do not like this survey at all, and I think it's statistically very inaccurate. According to the survey, rankings-wise, we're 20th in sidewalks, 20th percentile. So that means 80% of cities are better than us. Appearance, 24th. Feeling of safety, 16th. Violent crime, 21st. Police services, 11th percentile. Quality of parks, 14th percentile. Cleanliness, 27th percentile, and customer service by city employees, 27th percentile. And in all of those but one, it says similar to other cities. So we can rank in the 14th percentile and still be similar. I think this goes back to the margin of error. I think this is way too much based off feelings and not facts, according to what our city, and I think that could lead to some bad policy making. So I think we should really explore other options and get an accurate picture of what is going on in our city. One of the things that I think is on here is, according to us, we rank 5th in federal government, which I'm not sure why that would be on there, but I think that is skewing the numbers for how people feel right now in our state, which is giving an inaccurate picture of how things really are. And so I would like to explore different ways of reaching out to the community, because I just don't think this study or this poll is statistically or reality or factually accurate.
Yeah, I found it to, so, taking a poll like this, especially on the economy part, during this type of economic You know, a lot of federal funds have dried up, some state funds have dried up, and I found, when I saw that 53% of the people felt good about our economy, that felt good. Some other parts, you know, it's a decent snapshot, which is, you know, we'll be able to use some pieces of this in our plan. But to Councilmember Dunning's point, you know, information can be fallible. Information can be steered. I don't think this is, per se, but I appreciate the snapshot and the effort that you guys put in to try to make this happen so that we can get take a dive into, you know, how our community views our work. So thank you for getting this done.
Councilmember Dunning, I appreciate the comments, and it's really helpful and good feedback, and we're certainly going to, follow up and ask some questions. I think, just to drive home, yes, it's about perceptions and trying to figure out where people are at so that we can maybe take a look at how we also communicate some of our programming and some of the work and getting that information out there to try to match realities with perception and getting corrected information. But I think you bring up some good points, and we'll certainly take that into consideration as we're looking in the future.
And you reminded me of a point I wanted to highlight. It said 32% of people have been contacted by the city in this study. Every single person in the study was contacted by the city.
32 people?
32% have been contacted by the city. Every single person who took this survey was contacted by the city.
Well, they were contacted by Polko, I suppose, if we wanted to
Well,
get
they got the
technical.
flyer that had
Yeah.
our name on it.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stedman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Hey, it's not always popular bringing up constructive criticism, but I appreciate that, Nick. I would say it is a start. I mean, we've all tried things the first time, and there's going to be growing pains, but, it's a start, so I celebrate that.
Councilmember Vasquez.
I'm familiar with Polko. They're like nationally recognized, so I know that they know their stuff. One of my questions is, did incomplete survey data get included in the final report? Because I think I was one of the people who took this survey, if memory serves, and it was so long. I lost precious moments of my life filling this survey out. I was like, I cannot believe how many questions are on this survey. Like,
That was my other, it was so many questions.
I do
Yeah.
surveys in my day job, and we try to keep them short so that you get a higher completion rate, right? And so I wonder how many people dropped off before they got to, the good stuff at the bottom. So did we include those partials?
I believe there is information on that in the survey packet of how they dealt with incomplete data or things that were left blank. I do know also that Polko they do their statistical filtering to get rid of things that are outliers or suspicious in some way. So I'm not sure how that played in there, but we can certainly clarify with them.
Councilmember Cox.
Now, I just want to add my thanks for going out and doing this dive in an attempt to get more information that generates data, whether it's exactly what we want or not, that helps drive decisions. So I think it's really important that this was undertaken, and I appreciate staff for doing that.
Thank you.
In our contract with Polko, do we have the opportunity to ask them to do additional touch surveys on particular focus areas? Because if we do, we should make those focus surveys in those specific areas. Maybe it's public safety. Maybe we'll want to ask more questions about perceptions of public safety because we know that actual crime statistics and data is out of alignment with the perception in Lacey. We should make the survey short.
The answer is yes. We do have the opportunity to do follow-up surveys and shorter and smaller surveys, yes.
That'd be great.
I think one of the things with that, it's a great tool. We do have a package, and so we can dive into one of these. We can also add kind of unique questions, whereas this was all standardized. These are the same long list of questions that are asked of every community. But I think the thing to consider too is we certainly are going to want to use those tools, but there is a difference between, sending mailers out to, residents and having control and trying to find a statistically valid answer comparative to potentially just opening it up to community members broadly. That's also something we need to consider as we're looking through different types of data. And so one thing that I mentioned earlier when I started was that the dashboard, which you all can access through the staff report, and we'll make sure that we're looking at how we get information out to the community to access it as well, is there is information on the open survey as well. And so you can take a look at that data, but what we wanted to focus on was the statistically valid information tonight.
I think even the respondents on this survey, and I know it's weighted, so we've controlled for it, but there was a significant overrepresentation of people 55 years and older. Like, there's so many folks in that age demographic responding to the survey, and like, we weighted it so that the younger folks had their voice accurately represented based on their population in the community, but it's hard to get a representative sample on a survey like this.
Polko actually noted that same thing, and that's consistent with surveys that they see across the country, too.
And folks that are really looking at their mail and have the time to respond to a long survey.
Yeah.
City Manager.
Yeah, thank you. This is very good feedback, because this is our first effort this. We're going to get ready to do this in 2 years again, and start with that, build off this baseline. We can also look at working with Polko and how we set up that next survey, or do some intermediate surveys, more focused. But one of the nice things about it, yes, it is a very long survey to fill out, but it gets to the broad breadth of topics and themes that we don't normally get in terms of what people are thinking about their community. And then one point of nuance too is, you're right, everybody that took this survey, 100% of them were contacted by the city. What this was looking for is how often do they contact the city for help or information? And one of the things going in that section isn't telling, because there's only 32% of the people out there took the survey said they contacted city staff for help or information. 13% contacted an elected official, and then 6% attended a public meeting. So that kind of shows too, there's some disconnects and needs that we need to look at. How do we get communication out to the community so they're aware of what's going on? Going back to what I think Ty said earlier, they're aware of the good things we're doing and what are the problems we have and how we're working to solve them, and getting that positive information and getting that connection back with the community members as we are growing to become a larger community. So this is going to be hopeful in kind of identifying some of those things and how we can take perceptions and give people more information so those perceptions become more grounded over time.
I think one of the other groups within the survey that I want to just highlight, that we want to hear more from, is folks that live in apartments or who don't own their own home, right? They were underrepresented compared to homeowners. Like, and maybe they just moved here and they don't feel as connected to the city yet. And so we want to hear from them so we can figure out how to connect them, and like, how do we reach them if they're not connected yet? So it's this puzzle that we have to try to solve.
A great point, and one of the things Polko intentionally did was try to weight more surveys to go to multifamilies, but as you can see and you pointed out, when you're looking at the results, it's still weighted, heavily to
Single family.
Owners, and so having to weight that as part of the process.
I think we also have a factor in, we have a lot of active military who are only here for a few years, and then, they come and go. So their ability to really get rooted is somewhat limited by the length of time that they're here.
Yeah, and I like that you can kind of aggregate the data based on how long they've been in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other things that you can do on the dashboard.
Yeah. And there's a lot of ways that we can split that data, and I spent hours getting lost in looking at the percentages here, and, I wonder why these groups think this, I wonder why this area thinks this, and it's interesting stuff when you dive into it. But it also represents, the danger of trying to justify, why is this number this way, and what are people in this area thinking, or what are these people thinking, and answering these questions and things. So it's, if you think about the way that people go through taking surveys and the way that people then gather all of that data, if somebody has a positive interaction with a city employee, that will affect how they answer survey questions. If they have a negative interaction, that'll affect how they answer survey questions. So if they read something in the news from some other community, that could affect the way they answer a survey question about our community. So there's a lot of things that go into how people will take in the data in their life and then reflect that on how they rate their community that they live in.
And along those lines, I noticed that some of the areas that scored higher for their satisfaction were some of the newer areas like the Hawks Prairie and the Horizons and lakes. And I thought, is it because they've got the newer roads and sidewalks and the bike lanes and all the updated amenities?
Different standards of development, yeah.
Yeah.
And we also talked a little bit about public safety too. And overall, public safety numbers were one thing, but what we found in the survey is that people had some concerns about perceived safety downtown, but they love the safety level in their neighborhoods, and they love being in their neighborhoods. And
It's just
so-
like Congress is a mess, but my congressperson is great. And that is a pervasive sentiment, like everybody feels that way.
That's what kind of where I was worried about, and maybe it's just a timing thing, but just how people are feeling, nationally versus how they feel about the Washington State right now. It's just like, I don't know if there's a timing thing, but they're looking at some of those numbers. I was like, I could see how a lot of this was influenced, and it was so long that it was like, that's where there's just, we need to figure out how to get this data, but we need to figure out how to get it most accurately, whether it's combining maybe in-person ones that we do it, and maybe aggregating those scores together somehow. These numbers, I'm not a fan of.
It's a very interesting first look. We're
Yeah.
glad you guys took this work on, so thank you, and we look forward to seeing you guys with us again and seeing how it's going to be infused into some of the policies that we're going to be looking at this next year. Okay, next on our agenda
I'm saying.
is our Assistant City Manager presenting our Community and Cultural Event Grant.
Well,
Are you
good
prepared
evening
for
again.
that?
It's been a long time since I talked to you all last. So I'm here tonight to talk about a Community and Cultural Event Grant program that has been working its way through the Commission on Equity. And I know I have a slide presentation coming up here shortly. Thank you. Thank you for the assist here.
Back up to the backup.
Perfect. Appreciate the help. So the purpose of tonight is really just for discussion. Like I mentioned, this has been something that the Commission on Equity has been working on. They've reviewed it starting back in February through March and then June. It aligns with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategic Plan. And, if the council decides to move forward, we're thinking of starting small with like a $25,000 budget. And why this work was something that was directed by the City Council, not only as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategic Plan, but also in the 2025 work plan for the Commission on Equity. So just to run through really quickly, what's in the strategic plan, there is a goal for city services to be responsive, transparent, accountable, equitable, and welcoming, with an emphasis on providing a safe and trusted environment for underserved community members. There's an additional benchmark here that talks about increasing the number and support for events and programming that highlights cultural diversity. And there's a final benchmark in here that talks about increasing city engagement at non-city events. If you recall, back in January, we had some meetings with our advisory boards, and each advisory board presented its work plan, and the council provided some additions. For the Commission on Equity, one of the discussion items that came up was talking about looking at ways to celebrate community celebrations, including events for our LGBTQIA+ community and Latino events. And this is something that made it through the 2025 work plan, and the Commission on Equity has been working on it ever since. As part of their review, one of the things that the Commission on Equity talked about was some kind of global considerations for the organization and the community. So number one, as our Parks Director, just provided an overview in the first presentation, we have a limited resource capacity within our Parks Department and some of our administrative departments to provide services, and events take a lot of planning. I know the Parks Department does a fantastic and excellent job, but a lot of work and effort goes into creating those events. The other thing that we talked a lot about was just having sustainability and community buy-in. So the community has, some teeth in the game, and having something that's grassroots and starting with a community member's idea and building, momentum over time, where the community is engaged and wants to continue to participate rather than something that, just gets put on and continue to be put on. We also talked about transparency and equity, and that's obviously one of the things that the Commission on Equity focuses a lot with, of how would we design something where it's accessible for multiple community groups who could be interested, so that way we can have something where there is more procedural and fairness in some of the events that get created. And then finally, we talked about alignment with city funding. And so as part of that alignment with city funding, we went over, some of the funding elements within our current budget. We talked, like I mentioned, about the city events that were ongoing and how, things like cultural celebration, spring fun fair, Children's Day, all of this takes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of capacity in our Parks Department, in our Communications Department, in our Public Works Department, in our Police Department, et cetera. We also overviewed, several of the grant programs that we have existing here at the city. And so we talked about lodging tax and went over, really there's a statutorily defined purpose, for lodging tax. And so the city, collects these dollars. They're really intended to increase tourism and boost overnight stays. You can see allowable uses are for tourism marketing, special events and festivals designed to attract tourists. Operations for capital or for expenditures for tourism-related facilities, whether they are owned by the city, a nonprofit, et cetera. And so one of the discussions we had as part of this was, just taking a look at some of our previous, LTAC funding, that there are, several, awardees that would fit under a potential community or cultural grant program. So looking for just kind of a, hey, is there another way to potentially, get funding for those types of events that we want to see in the community that really help boost, community-driven, community-centered events? The other thing we looked at as some of our other grant programs are our neighborhood matching grant program. So this is a grant program that you all are very familiar with, where we have $60,000 and it can go out to HOAs or informal neighborhood groups, where they can make improvements within their communities, and they have to have a match of 50%. We took a look at our newest grant program, which is the 2024 Human Services Grant Program, and looked at kind of, the dollars there and how it was used and who's eligible and what the process was. We also then kind of went for a more global view. So we started to take a look at what some other jurisdictions around the country and also around the world were doing. So we found some examples of community grant programs in Bend, Oregon. We also took a look at Wellington, New Zealand. And finally, we took a look at, I'm going to say this wrong, Broward County, sorry, Florida. I hope that's right. I don't know, Councilmember Cox, if you can correct me. Broward. Thank you. Appreciate that. We took a look at how they do their arts and cultural festival and special event sponsorship. Through that, we reviewed several items for a possible grant program, and we took a look at the purpose, what the process would be, who could be eligible, what the funding use would be, how could we increase transparency through reporting, and then what type of funding would be available. And so in your staff report, you have an attachment which has a draft policy, and I'll briefly go over it. But what it effectively says is that the policy would, if this was to move forward, the city council would provide funding in the budget. There would be an application window. It would be reviewed by city staff to make sure it reached the eligibility. It would then go to the Commission on Equity for review and recommendations for funding. And then it would go to city council for final approval for awardees. And then once those events happened, we would be working with these entities to help make sure that we're getting the word out that these events are going on. We could even work about making sure that, the city has a presence through informational booth or something like that, et cetera, at each of the events. And there would be a reporting mechanism that would go back to the Commission on Equity and eventually the city council. So the Commission on Equity reviewed this, and their recommendation was to send the draft policy to you all for review and consideration for whether or not you wanted to move forward with a potential program starting in 2026. Just to review the policy again, you can see the outline of the goals, the program requirements. And I do want to highlight here under program requirements, item number 2, eligible entities. One of the additions that's not in your packet tonight that the Commission on Equity wanted to make was that eligible entities could be nonprofits with a 501c3 status, or they have to have documentation of a fiscal sponsor who meets that requirement. That was the addition after a couple of iterations that the Commission on Equity wanted to make sure got into the draft policy. You can see that there are a list of ineligible entities. So just want to make sure that the only thing that would, a church could apply for these dollars, but it couldn't be used for anything promoting religious purposes. You couldn't use any dollars for political organizations or individual campaigns. And obviously, you couldn't use anything that would discriminate. In the draft, you can see that the city would award the funding. Any applicant would not be, entitled to anything they applied for. Our maximum and minimum awards that we discussed was having a maximum of 5,000 and a minimum of 500. But really kind of hoping to focus on the higher side of that to reduce some of the administrative labor, but also recognizing that, the events that are potentially asking for these dollars are likely going to need larger amounts, and that 500 might not be sufficient to put on an event or help put on an event. Mm-hmm. It also talks about how proposals don't require a dollar-for-dollar match. However, there could be a tool that helps in the future in the evaluation process that may consider that as one of the elements to look at and review. And then the outline of the process that I just talked about of, going through a selection process that includes recommendations by the Commission on Equity. We talked about the organizations. This just provides a little bit more about what we'd be looking for, including that annual report of how the event went and how the dollars were used. Finally, it talks about acceptable funding uses, unacceptable funding uses, and a probation period if, for example, somebody was funded, but then they were unable to use the dollars and what could happen moving forward. And then the last item is transparency. One of the things that we'd want to make sure that we were providing is accessible information to the community of where these dollars are going, where the events are happening, and who, if there's point of contact or website information to learn more. And like I said, the Commission on Equity's recommendation was to move forward with the community and cultural event grant policy. Again, we're here tonight only for a discussion, but the recommendation would be to provide direction to the city manager to provide funding in the 2026 budget for this grant program at a future date. Is there any questions I can answer for the council?
I don't see any green lights yet. There we go.
Me. I would say that I appreciate having the Commission on Equity serve as the review body rather than trying to stand up a different committee or having us review all of the applications. I feel like that's in line with their charge already for what they do for the city of Lacey, and it's nice to have somebody doing the pre-review and just making recommendations for funding to the council. So I like that structure.
Councilmember Dunning?
Yeah, I just kept coming back to, something I was thinking about with these events and how big a success the night market has been, and then been able to specify days for different communities in those events. Just, I don't know if you guys went to some of them, but it kind of knocked out, us having to do these large events, and there's, 1,000, 2,000 people showing up. And I just keep coming back to this. I feel like if there's potential to coordinate where, someone come in and have maybe even a bigger, a few signature event night markets that are even bigger would be a really easy way to save a lot of cost and get more involvement and get more of the community out without, how much some of these things kind of, cost already, because we're already doing it. So if there's any potential for overlap there, I think that would be a great place to start.
So they can still apply for LTAC and this,
Yeah, there was nothing that would prohibit any entity from applying for multiple pots as this was set up. And again, one of the things we wanted to see is, could this be an alternative for some of the community-centered events specifically?
Okay.
That wouldn't necessarily meet the full qualification of LTAC, but here's another avenue for those events to try to get some seed money to build those festivals.
So I saw on there, like, if churches are doing churchy stuff, they're disqualified?
You would not be eligible to apply if you were promoting religious events.
Doing churchy stuff? You can't do churchy stuff with this money?
Correct.
Is that like a state law or something?
Yeah, then I don't have it specifically in front of me, but it would be similar to, obviously we don't want to promote political activity. We don't want to use dollars for, alcohol, et cetera.
Is that a law is that a rule that we made, or is that something that is coming down and we have to enforce?
Deputy Mayor, I don't have a exact answer for you. I can certainly find the source for it, but I would say, obviously we want public dollars going to public projects that benefit all of the community.
I have just a little question about 501c3 status. It can be a little bit challenging for smaller or newer nonprofit or charitable organizations to attain a 501c3 status. Like an organization that I used to be the registered agent for, it took us several years to be able to get the 501c3 status. So was there discussion about, providing a different path? I guess the financial agent piece, like if there's another organization sort of sponsoring them, then they can satisfy the requirements, but like just being registered under the Secretary of State's office, that's not sufficient.
Yeah, there was a lengthy discussion at the Commission on Equity, kind of exactly what you just said of, are we creating, very particular barriers that could deter community members, but then how do we also make sure that, these events are serving the greater good and may not be, necessarily for profit or are community oriented. And so one of the things that the Commission on Equity members came up with was the idea of, okay, you don't necessarily need to have the 501(c3) status if you can get a fiscal agent to sponsor you.
Co-signer.
Yep.
But I thought Malcolm brought up a good point, though, because I remember when we were doing our grant process for the Human Services grant, I think it was last year, we had some groups apply for like youth camps and stuff like that from different churches. And I think there should be, if a church wants to hold an event, I wouldn't want to exclude them, but not, obviously, if it's not, just specifically for promoting the church, I would want some language in there to make sure that they don't think that they can still at least apply if it's,
Yeah, and
a community event that they're doing.
Yeah, so religious organizations are not excluded from receiving grants or dollars from this program. It would only be for things that were promoting religious purposes.
Okay,
So
okay,
just to
thank you for
clarify,
clarifying, yeah.
so,
So if they were doing like Friend Day and something along those lines, then, okay.
yep, absolutely.
Understood.
So if it was say a community block party barbecue, as an example.
Okay.
But no baptism parties.
Right, you can't get baptized with these dollars.
And just to clarify, the Washington State Constitution doesn't allow public dollars to go towards religious activities. But again, as Shannon said in the policy, it doesn't exclude them, it just specifies that it has to be a community benefit and couldn't be exclusionary.
Right, got it.
These are not proselytizing events,
Right.
basically.
Gotcha.
Thank you for finding that information.
Okay, well, I think you have some direction. Do you feel like you have some direction?
I gotta ask the question though, does the council want to make that decision, like give me direction to start incorporating this into the budget, just for?
We really need to put this in front of the full council so that everybody has a chance to look at it. If we can, do we have time for that?
We do, we have a majority council here, and there's just, if you're ready to make a decision, that's fine. If you want to wait for the full council, that's fine too. I'm just going to add, in terms of budgetary issues, there is a way that we can shift some dollars around to accommodate this 25,000. If the council recalls, you authorized a contract with the Dispute Resolution Center to deal with the facilitation of disputes between landlords and tenants and HOAs. And that contract was set up to be not to exceed $50,000 a year. So far, that activity in a 12-month period has been right around $12,000 to $14,000. So there's a way when that contract comes up in 2026, we can look at reducing that number down to 25 and use the additional 25 to fund this program.
And probably still leave capacity on that contract.
On both contracts, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one thing I'm just really interested to see, how people, because it's not a lot of money, how people would actually be able to take advantage of it. That's my biggest worry, is just who's going to be able to utilize it, But I think it's a good thing for our community, so
Councilmember Stedman?
I'd be okay with it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Hey, City Manager, are you looking for official action or just a thumb,
Well,
head nod?
at some point, direction, if the council wants this to be incorporated into the budget, and I would work with our finance team and put this in, you can give that direction tonight, or if you want to wait till all council members are present, that's fine too.
I'm good with tonight or whatever the majority of the council prefers, but, I'd rather take action sooner rather than later.
Well, and I, the very top line in this presentation is discussion only. And so while I am comfortable with giving direction and bringing this and doing what needs to be done to make it as part of our budget, I didn't want to take any action without the full council.
And
So-
that's fine.
So, yeah, but in
And
terms
I
of,
respect that too, Deputy Mayor.
This is a straw poll. We're in favor of proceeding.
we are in
with
favor of
this.
proceeding.
We'll take action in a
Please
future
and thank
meeting. It's
you.
nice to know that there's a source for funding that seems
So
promising.
what we'll do is I'll schedule it for the city manager's report for the next council meeting to have the full count, have another conversation about it, and then full discussion with the full council.
We're definitely not trying to stall you.
Not,
Okay.
Well, and to be able to point out that it's revenue neutral, because
Yep.
there are sensitivities around the budget, so, thanks.
Great, well, thank you, council, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And the last item on tonight's agenda is our Metropolitan Parks District brief from our Parks and Cultural Recreation Director, Jen Burbidge. Hey, Jen.
We've got some slides coming up here, but while that's happening, I'd like to thank the council for setting some time aside tonight to, review the recent Lacey Metropolitan Park District proposal and talk about the future of Lacey Parks funding. So I would like to quickly, kind of set the stage here, reviewing the context of why we're having this conversation. I know you're all very familiar, but maybe people in the public might want some of this information, and just to kind of go back and review what we've done. And then as we move into a discussion, I've got a few guiding questions for discussion for council to consider to help guide the conversation, and then we'll talk about next steps. So historically, as you know, Lacey Parks has an aging infrastructure amidst a growing population of residents and users of the park system. And so we've long needed, and as identified in our comprehensive plan, a dedicated sustainable funding source to help meet funding gaps, accomplish maintenance needs, and of course, execute the parks projects. So in June, let's go back in time a little bit here. As you'll recall, in June of 2024, with the support of council, we established the Parks Improvement Funding Work Group, a community member group tasked with assessing the challenges and formally making a recommendation of a path forward to the council. And that work group did determine going out to the voters for the Metropolitan Park District funding was the most viable option, and council did approve putting the proposal on the ballot, and staff then moved forward in developing a communications plan. And then, as you know, April through August was very busy months of engaging the community, making sure to distribute correct information to the public, and notably, staff gave 27 community presentations, and also, it's not up here on the screen, but also we're at key events distributing that information. And you'll see a lot of our, of course, using all of our means of outreach and communication with the public, but again, spreading that information about the ballot measure. And I'll note too, that last bullet point, outside of city communication, there was a strong community-driven effort. I think that came up earlier in the conversation as well. And regarding that effort, that great effort that we just saw on the last couple of slides, it's important to pause here and just really sincerely thank the staff who contributed and helped out. It was a pretty heavy lift, and so thank you to park staff, public works staff, finance staff, and communications staff for all the support. And I also want to thank community partners who were supportive and helpful with this lift, and also the residents, particularly voters, neighbors talking to neighbors, sharing information, discussing, reviewing, considering. So we really appreciate everyone who was involved in this. Then moving on to the August 5th election, as we know, the proposal did not receive the necessary votes to allow for the formation of that MPD. It was a narrow margin of 688 votes, but we all know that moving forward, the needs still exist. And so, as stated before, Lacey Parks needs a dedicated, sustainable funding source to help meet funding gaps, accomplish maintenance needs, and pull off those parks projects, which is what we're here to discuss, essentially. So we've prepared 3 questions to help guide this evening's discussion, and I'm going to go through them and give some insights, thoughts that we have as a staff, and then would love to hear council's feedback. And for sure, if you have a thought about one of the previous questions later, we can go back and do that too. I know you haven't had a chance to review these questions, although I'm sure the council has had similar questions in your own minds as well. So the first one is, how does parks, culture, and recreation funding needs fit into the priorities of city funding? And some thoughts here is that capital improvement and replacement program will have to be limited based on availability of dedicated funding. Priority for capital projects will need to be replacements. And just understanding a limited capacity of general fund and increasing operating costs, not just in parks, but citywide, really. The general fund level of services and expenditures will most likely need to be reviewed, of course, at the direction of the city manager and the finance director, as we move through future budget processes. And just really recognizing with that second bullet point there, just that we wouldn't be able to add new or expanded improvements that increase maintenance responsibilities because of those rising costs and not having a dedicated source. So I'll pause and see if there's any thoughts from the council.
I guess still sad. But I also know that our capital improvements are significant, right? Parks is on the list, but so are things like the Joint Animal Services Facility and other parts of our aging infrastructure, the shop, this building, and the way that we're not using the space effectively. And so I have some reticence around using funding for capital improvement to support parks when I know that the demand on those dollars is so great already.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there are some, like the animal services, there's an interlocal agreement and partnership there that we have to be mindful of too, as we look at our funding priorities. And, with the capital improvement and replacement program, even if we were able to find dollars for a project in parks, we may need to focus on a replacement project that doesn't increase our maintenance responsibility or expand our systems, but actually just maintains what we have and as best we can.
I think we're all probably a little sad still. The timing we thought was going to be good. Some federal things came up that kind of didn't help us at all. I understand that we're going to have to, limit ourselves to replacement items as opposed to, building a collegiate-sized baseball field and doing some of the other bigger things that we would really
A
hope to get
splash
done.
pad.
And the splash pads for the kids.
Have nice
And the
things.
young child and family center that we're all ambitious about. But I do want to say that it was a bold move. It was a bold, ambitious move of us to put that out there and see if we could go for it. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got to gauge and see where we were truly at. And I'm hoping that we try it again. But I don't think we should try it again for another at least 3, 4, or 5 years. And how do we bridge these gaps? I don't know. Really don't. And I've thought about it for weeks now. How are we going to deliver?
Well, one of the comments you had about, going out again, that's kind of segues into the next slide too, is looking at different options and being strategic to it, and,
Yep.
you want to go on.
Good, yep.
Um,
Thank you for that. So is soliciting public funding a viable option for Lacey Parks? And public funding being, of course, the MPD, there's Public Facilities District opportunities, general obligation
Go bonds.
bond, et cetera. And so reevaluating the Parks Capital Improvement Program and prioritizing projects that are feasible in the next planning horizon is, something that we need to do. Also evaluating the feasibility of voted revenue options. And so, for example, is there maybe a better opportunity for a smaller geo bond, for playground replacements or something to that scale? Is there an opportunity for public facility district, potentially for a more narrowly focused project like the museum or an aquatic center? Something that's, as compared to the Metropolitan Park District proposal with the projects, I'm envisioning the map with the projects, spread all over Lacey with the wider focus on multiple projects and the maintenance to keep those up. So that's what I mean by reevaluating and evaluating the feasibility. Another thought too is surveying the community now to better understand where people are at currently, post-vote. Would need to determine the best format for that, but it's just a, part of the conversation.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think so much of this was a timing thing, and I think that's unfortunate. And that's just something I think we need to evaluate better is what's the status for our economy, what's the status, before, I know we kind of had a timeline where, that we were moving forward, but I think that just needs to be a bigger consideration in the future of saying, if the economic situation doesn't look good, or we just passed a couple sales tax raises, or they just, I think there was just a lot on people's plate, and I don't think it's a reflection of really where our city's at. I think it's a reflection of just where the economy's at, and I think we just need to do a better job of evaluating that in the future.
Yeah, when we start putting together the group and we had a little bit of different of economy at that point in time. And so once, the year turned over, and a lot of federal funds started drying up and a lot of state funds started drying up, but we were already slated to put this thing out. So, the timing, in my opinion, probably definitely wasn't in our favor.
Yeah, 'cause that's one of the challenges too, trying to figure out where's that window between other partner initiatives. So there's not that, double down or triple down in a certain year. And then process like this to get that community support and information out there started a year in advance, more than a year in advance of the ballot date. And so trying to guess, we had a good understanding where kind of the economy was, but things changed significantly as we were going into this too, so in the fly. So that is, need to figure out how we best gauge that, and then maybe it's kind of like Jen says, is maybe a little bit different type of survey work to kind of get a sense where people, what they're thinking and what they may be thinking the next time around.
Councilmember Stedman?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think, it's like the regional athletic facility. We haven't had a bond measure since 2002, right? And, when funds start drying up, right, and it starts hitting their wallet and they can't afford things, stuff like this is gonna fail. But it's like nonprofits in the same situation. They're gonna need to team up together and combine their efforts, and maybe something like with the county or one of the other municipalities, we team up together and get something done. But, that's what we did in the past, so maybe we should look in that direction.
Yeah.
Yep, moving on to the last question that we prepared here. How
Well,
do
can we
Oh, I'm
just-
sorry.
Can we pause and go back just real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to talk about the possibility of some go bonds. We don't really take out much debt, and I don't see us really taking out any, new debt for parks unless we can all come together on that. But I don't want to, throw that away as an option. I know we do everything we can to avoid, incurring any new expenses. I know we're going to be talking about House Bill 2015 coming up pretty soon. And yeah, it looks great for 3 years, but then after that, how do we continue to cover the cost? Is it 13?
It's 3.
It's 3 years, okay. So how do we continue to cover the cost after those 3 years? So, in light of what's happened with this, this vote, I would be willing to consider, maybe taking some debt to get something cool happening and something done in terms of parks. Because of our debt load currently is hovering around 3%,
Yeah, a little bit less than that, yeah.
a little less than 3%.
I have to go back and look. I can't remember how much the debt on the police station has increased that, but it's somewhere in that 3 to 5.
So somewhere in that 3 to 5%. We've increased a little bit of debt. For the longest time, we were hovering around 1 to 2%, and it was just super low. But there are some things that need to be done. And I think probably in this upcoming retreat, we're going to probably make a priority list of what needs to go first. And I know Parks is always pretty high on that list. So just to plant that seed with you guys, hey, this is something we're going to be looking at potentially.
I could definitely get behind that. I think, particularly when we look at the aging parks question and the very limited opportunity to get a ballot issue through, given the complexity of timing with other jurisdictions having their levies and all this stuff, that I think that's probably something we should look at.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how much, we can't say today how much is needed, but I do think our parks are one of our strongest assets as a city, and that we would be irresponsible not to try to find a way to fund improvements, to maintain them, to do what we can to expand Cuyo, the RAC. There's just so much need there, and it exceeds our ability with the general fund to fund those.
I may not be here when this decision comes before the council, but I'm supportive as well, because I think it's irresponsible of us to defer maintenance, right? Some of our parks need maintenance, they need repairs, they need that targeted investment to keep them nice. It's just like how we do with our roads, right? We try to keep our roads good because it's more expensive to fix a road that has deteriorated into very poor condition. Same with parks. Deferred maintenance is never cheaper. So it's going to take us a while to figure out whether or not it makes sense to go back to the voters to ask for additional funding options. In the meantime, we need to maintain what we have and not let it degrade.
Just to light the total on that, to caveat, in 18 to 24 months, we're most likely going to look at a much different federal interest rate environment, which would be a good time, and taking on that debt will be much less expensive in the long run too, and so that could be a lot of potential there to put some plans in place for when those interest rates are better and we can get debt cheaper, so.
Councilor Stebbins has
Being
a-
conscious of not adding maintenance needs. I think I heard you say that, but just reiterating.
Councilmember Stebbins?
Yeah, thank you. You know what, that's gonna be a hard sell for me. I don't think I can support taking on debt when we have a deficit like we're facing. My kids learn how to swim in the parks. They play baseball, learn how to dance. And all those wonderful years I have with my kids, all because of the parks and culture, right? But I'm also a business owner. And when you don't have money to pay for what you have already, it's not good practice to take on debt. It's just not, as much as I love the parks.
Yep, and I'm gonna agree with you on that. As we get closer to a finalized budget, we've looked at different ways to cut expenses, we've looked at different revenue options. After that season is over, then we can, have a little further conversation about this, because I think it's gonna be at that time that we might be able to see the light to doing something like this.
And yeah,
Fair enough.
and just one particular clarification on the general obligation bond, that there's two options, right? There's the revenue option, where we take existing city revenues and divert them over to pay off debt, like we did with the police station. We used real estate excise tax revenue as a portion of that to make that payment. We don't have that ability to do revenue debt, because our funds coming in need to go to current operations and service. So that general obligation debt would actually be a voter-approved debt, similar to what we did in 2003 and 2000, and refunded in 2012. So it'd be a specific 20-year time period. It'd be for specific projects identified, and probably be replacement-type projects. The thing is, there's restrictions on those type of debt because you can't use it for maintenance, so it has to be for a capital project. And so there's those pieces too. So when you go out,
And a
how do
number of
you identify so you're not increasing your maintenance burden, but also refreshing whatever park facilities you have? So that's the type of conversations we need to sit down with council, be strategic, how we best do this that may be best received by the community and to be in favor and voting for it, and then it goes back into timing that we've talked about as well.
So at the beginning of the year, we'll be able to revisit this conversation and see if it's even viable at that point in time, after we get our budget settled.
Thank you for that clarification. I misunderstood multiple pieces of that previous discussion. Now I'm caught up.
All right, the third question, how do we meet the needs of a growing community and an aging park system? And as I said before, there's, funding gaps to meet the maintenance needs and accomplish parks improvement projects. And so what will be important is continuing communications that highlight the value of parks. And for me, there's a couple of things on this that are just ringing true as the more I think about it. We need to constantly tell our story. I think people value what we do for the community, but they might not understand the cost and the significant replacement needs we have. And then the other thing is to keep the current community group engaged and the parks champions who understand the need and want to help, and really keeping that relationship strong as we move forward. And then that second one, the priority for capital projects will need to be replacement. We did talk about that with the from a previous one, but just to kind of reiterate that improvement projects that increase maintenance costs would need to be put on hold to focus on that replacement. And then really positioning programs to be ready when economic conditions, improved and there's a demonstrated public support to raise revenue for parks. And I think just to kind of be ready when the time comes, sort of thing. Any discussion on that one?
Not really, but I just wanted to say thank you. I know your whole staff, works their butt off and is trying to manage this as best as possible and come up with the best ideas for the best, for the community as possible. So, like I said, it's not a reflection on, I think, anything that you guys did, and I just want to say thank you for how your entire team really takes care of the city, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are definitely the most popular department that we have, especially with the 3rd of July and the rack and the different areas that we have for community to meet and gather and stuff like that. And as we add more units throughout the city, I just saw a plan this morning for another 200 units out in Hawks Prairie. And our park space is going to, when I drive by, I'm looking to see if there's kids in parks, right? All the time, especially in the winter. And it's this time of year, like our parks are full. Like when the sun is out, the parks have people, which I'm happy to see, right? And I like to Councilmember Vasquez's point, we don't want to defer any of that maintenance. We couldn't use, and if our general fund dollars end up going primarily to maintenance, we're gonna have to find some kind of substitute for capital. It's just the way it is. Even with the JazzCom situation, some of our the shop situation, and some of our other infrastructure that the survey or the study that we had done said is critical, important to get to as soon as possible. So we need some new revenue. We need some new businesses. We need to plug some holes where we are leaking and hemorrhaging dollars.
Yeah, and you jog my memory too of another thing that we failed to mention, but continue to work with our community partners, because even with the funding we've had in the past, we couldn't do it without community partners like our service groups. There's been multiple parks projects that have been able to close the gap and come to fruition based on either a Rotary or the pickleball associations or the groups out there that are willing to partner. And so continue to foster those, and maybe like we talked about, Deputy Mayor, of recognizing that in the future council meeting, that civic involvement in building our community too.
Very current example is Bush Park.
Yep.
And having that equipment paid for. It's lovely.
Absolutely. Just a couple of the most tangible next steps. Begin outreach in preparation of the next Parks Plan update. It's never too early to start. staying engaged with the community, like I said before, strategically evaluating projects and options for funding, and then that, just as I said in the last slide, positioning programs to be ready when the economic conditions improve and there's strong, public support demonstrated for parks. So, thank you for the discussion and the support. Really
You bet.
appreciate it.
Well, with that, we have reached the end of our agenda for this Tuesday night. So without objection, I will call this meeting adjourned, and as usual, keep it classy, Lacey. Thank you, thank you.
Good night, everybody.